6 weeks after I stopped drinking, I found out that I had a lump in my breast and I was diagnosed with an aggressive type of breast cancer. So then it's like, oh my gosh, here is a life challenge. What have I done in the past?
Welcome to Your Second Act, the podcast that proves that life doesn't have to end at 40, 50, or even 60, because when it comes to living your best life, age is just a number. Hey guys, hope you're having an amazing start to your week, and thank you so much for popping me in your ears. Now, back in episode 4, I'm not sure if you remember, I spoke to a lady. Her name is Ali, and she gave up alcohol for an entire year. Now, after that episode was aired, I got so much feedback from my listeners and also from lots of friends, really wanting to know all about it, how it can actually happen, and, could they possibly go through something like that? So it sparked lots and lots of conversation. I thought, I'm going to try and get Ali's coach to come onto the podcast to really talk about the psychology behind why do we drink? Can we give it up? Because it really goes in deeper than just having a glass of wine. It's like there's a reason why we do what we do. So this week, I'm talking with Kath Elliott, whose story herself is one of personal transformation and finding strength in the face of life's challenges. Back in 2019, she quit alcohol after decades of binge drinking, which set off a chain of life-changing events. And just 6 weeks later, you wouldn't believe it, she was diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer. And after 15 months of treatment, she emerged cancer free with a whole new perspective on life. She left a long term career in media, retrained as an alcohol coach, and she launched her business, The Alcohol Mindset Coach, where she now helps midlife women rethink their relationship with alcohol. But that's just part of her journey. And she recently has started a new chapter of her life in her 50s as a single woman after ending a 24-year relationship. So today we explore her story of transformation, courage, and the powerful impact a lifestyle choice on living well in midlife can have on anybody. So let's dive into Kath's episode and really find out what it is that really makes us want to reach for that glass of wine and how we can help ourselves, if we want to, set ourselves free from alcohol and live an alcohol-free life. After my chat with one of your clients, Ali, I was surprised by how many conversations it sparked both online and with my own friends about whether giving up alcohol in midlife is actually realistic. And it seems like so many people are rethinking their relationship with drinking. And I really can't wait to hear your perspective. But before we get into that, I really want to hear your story and what made you decide to become an alcohol coach? Because you hear of people becoming coaches, but I actually had never heard of an alcohol coach. So really, really keen to understand, why you got into this space.
Yeah, thank you, Michelle. Well, it's interesting. My own lived experience with what I would call a binge drinking relationship with alcohol over many years is what brought me into becoming an alcohol coach. So I think for many years, I had what most people would think was a fairly normal or typical relationship with alcohol. I didn't drink every day. I certainly didn't drink every week, but I used to give a good nudge on weekends, on Friday nights, when I was on holidays. But underneath that, there was this deep sense of, I guess, feeling in myself that my drinking was more of a problem than I thought it was. I used to regularly sort of forget parts of nights, hazy memories. I'd often have long parts of nights where I would black out and I wouldn't remember. And then I'd be told about things that had happened the next day. And it just didn't sit well with me. But it was something that I tried to justify as, I'll grow out of this, or it doesn't happen regularly enough for it to be a problem. I don't have a daily or physically dependent relationship with alcohol. But I guess really for me, it was that as I got into my 30s and 40s, I got married, had children, and started to go down more of a development of looking more closely at, who I was and what I wanted out of my life and what my values were. It became very evident to me that my relationship with alcohol was clashing up against those values of health, of connection, of trust. Each and every time I would have a bad night or wake up regretting alcohol, I would really feel not good about myself. And so I tried moderation. I tried lots of those dry months. And you know what? I did them. I did them really well, but it didn't actually change my behavior or my relationship with myself. And it wasn't until a pivotal experience in that my three boys saw me really drunk one night on a family holiday, and it was so embarrassing. The next day, I was just in a lot of shame, a lot of regret. And my boys had been really worried about me. I'd fallen and hit my head and they thought something terrible had happened. And it was that moment that I thought, I want to change. I don't want this to happen anymore. I really want to be different. And it was then that I thought, why don't I experience an alcohol free lifestyle and see what opens up for me rather than thinking, I want to keep drinking in my life? I thought about, I get to take it out and see what happens. And it wasn't about, I had to quit drinking forever or that I must stop. It was actually providing myself with this space and opportunity, given other things hadn't worked. So on the 1st of July, 2019, I started my alcohol-free life, which I'm still in now, I guess, 5.5 years later. And the program that I initially signed up to was called This Naked Mind's 30-Day Alcohol Experiment by Annie Grace. And so for that first month, I engaged every day in this Facebook group. I watched some videos and it was really game changing for me. And I remember watching the coaches on those videos thinking to myself, wow, that looks like such an amazing job. I would love to be a This Naked Mind alcohol coach. And here I am now, 5.5 years later. I'm a senior, certified This Naked Mind coach, and I coach in a lot of their programs in America. And I also have my own alcohol coaching business, the Alcohol Mindset Coach.
Fantastic. Wow. And how how was it going through stopping alcohol to now? I mean, was it really a hard thing to give up initially? I mean, how many times did you want to just grab that glass again? Or was it that type of mindset that you went, no, this is it, and then I just move on with it?
I think for me, I really switched into a mindset of what I'm going to gain. Was it hard? Yeah, of course, there were uncomfortable times, but I started to see real benefits for myself early on, benefits in how I was feeling about myself, waking up in the mornings not feeling hungover. We had some big drinking friends over, big dinner early on in that first month. I ended up having a fabulous night. We hosted, there was lots of drinking from everyone else, but I still felt like I had a huge amount of fun. I woke up the next day, I remember thinking I felt so proud of myself, but I also thought I'm actually not missing out either. I feel like I am confident enough to engage socially without alcohol. So that really helped me. I guess the big curveball for me came unexpectedly 6 weeks after I stopped drinking. I found out that I had a lump in my breast and I was diagnosed with an aggressive type of breast cancer. So then it's like, oh my gosh, here is a life challenge. What have I done in the past? During a life challenge, I've reached for wine, for drinks, to numb. And I think that's often what other people expect to do. Oh, we've got to go and drown our sorrows or get a drink. But for me, it became really important to stay alcohol free so that I could be the best and healthiest version of myself, to work through all the treatment that I needed to undergo, chemotherapy, surgery, radiation, targeted therapy. There was a lot that I needed to go through. And once I started to do a little bit of research into the links between alcohol consumption and increased breast cancer risk, which are undeniable, and there are so many scientific studies that show that low to moderate amounts of alcohol, so only 7 standard drinks a week, can increase your overall risk of breast cancer, by up to 20%. So once I uncovered this information, I saw it as empowering. I was like, I've been abusing this lifestyle factor probably for decades. Um, this is my opportunity now to change and to work through treatment and obviously come through it, and then hopefully, if I'm okay, that if I'm still choosing not to drink, I've really kind of reduced my risk of a recurrence. So that was sort of how those initial months started. And I obviously had that weird cancer diagnosis that came, very early on in it.
Yeah, my gosh. I think, you said initially, I thought I was a normal drinker.
Mm.
And I think a lot of us think that we are. And then when we spoke a few weeks ago, it's like, what is normal drinking? I think a lot of us are in denial about how much we actually drink. Because, like you said, um, you might not have had anything to drink through the week, but then come Friday night or Saturday night, you're having what you probably would have consumed in a whole week in one night. And we kind of tell ourselves, oh, well, I just drink on the weekend, so I'm fine. But it's when you get to that point of saying, actually, I'm going to stop. And then you realize, well, I was drinking in excess and it wasn't really good for me. But I think I wonder, can you do that without stopping drinking? Or do you have to really stop to realize that you can live without it? Is it one or the other? Can you do it slowly? Or do you just have to go cold turkey?
No, some people can do it slowly. Some people, it's very helpful for them to really take a pause from being so critical and telling themselves they must stop, and really gathering more information about their drinking and becoming more mindful about why they're drinking, how regularly, how often. Some of that information is really useful in helping, I guess, find tools that will help you when you decide that you want to start to cut back or even take a break from drinking. And I think this is the thing. Yes, a lot of us have a relationship with alcohol, but everyone's is quite unique and different. And the reasons why people are using alcohol are incredibly complex as well. And without getting an understanding of those, it's very hard to really implement lasting change in your behavior. And really, the lasting change comes from a much deeper understanding of, you know, your psyche, why you've been drinking. And there's sometimes quite a lot of work that you have to do internally to help yourself feel positive that you can continue with such a big lifestyle change. And I think, in terms of, can you only see all the benefits if you take a break completely? Well, you can still see benefits of drinking less as well. And, it's not for everyone to stop drinking completely, or choose to lead an alcohol free lifestyle. One of the things that I really like to pose as a question is, it's not about yes or no. Sometimes it's about really getting curious about, what is the role that alcohol is playing in my life? Am I drinking on autopilot? Am I drinking consciously, subconsciously? Do I need to have a wine each time I go to an event? Can I challenge myself to go to a social event without and see what that feels like. Is it uncomfortable? Do I really think a lot about getting a glass of wine? I think all of these things help us get more of a picture of, how reliant we might be on substance, on alcohol, without actually really being that conscious or aware about it.
So, my understanding is you help a lot of midlife women through this journey. What's a common misconception that you find women come to you with about drinking, about giving up?
Yeah, I guess the biggest misconception that I have with women is that because they don't drink every day, they don't have a problem. Um, and this is, I specialize in really supporting binge drinkers, event weekend binge drinkers, and that their drinking isn't problematic enough for them to seek support or do something about it. So they stay stuck in a loop for a long period of time. And the other thing that's really interesting is they've often got people in their life who drink in a similar way, who are kind of enabling the behavior, but also normalizing it, right? And so you've got people saying, you're okay, you don't drink that much, you're healthy, you go to the gym, you do this, you do that, right? So you can come up with all of these justifications, everything in moderation. There's so many excuses that we can use. What I will say to anyone who's listening to this podcast, binge drinking is problematic drinking. Binge drinking is classified on the alcohol use disorder spectrum. It is problematic.
Really?
Absolutely, it is. And binge drinking in Australia for women is classified as four or more standard drinks in a sitting. And for men, it's five or more standard drinks in a setting. And that's not a lot when you think about it. When I think about the way I drink, 4 standard drinks, which is only 120 mils of wine. I mean, I feel like the glasses I used to pour were probably double that. 2 or 3 drinks might have been the pre-drink before going somewhere, right? So it's highly likely that there are a lot of people out there who are binge drinking and wouldn't even classify themselves as binge drinking. And this is, I guess, looking at kind of amounts that we are now told. But when I really tap into, what a binge drinker is, it's a psychological profile. And that psychological profile is very much someone who doesn't have an off switch, who drinks quickly, who often finds themselves drinking more than they want to, regret how they feel the next day, but they just sort of continue it, life of the party. Everyone knows them as that big drinker. Uh, and they'll often have, as I mentioned before, blackout drinking. They might do things that they can't remember and that they just keep repeating this pattern. What often happens is they'll put themselves into a period of alcohol-free weeks or a month or something off because, it's almost like self-punishment, and then they'll go back and then they'll build themselves up, and then there'll eventually be, an event that'll happen again where they'll drink too much, and so they'll be back. So it's kind of a cycle. Yeah.
It's a really, really tough one, but for me personally, I just really want to know, what are the effects that it has on a midlife woman's body? Because the way I reacted to alcohol, say when I was in my 20s and 30s, is far different to the way I deal with it now. I mean, it affects my sleep, it affects the way I think. And I know this isn't new, we all talk about it, but I just really wanted to have that understanding of what is the actual long term effect of drinking? And even when we get to midlife, like how is it really affecting us?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. And, one of the first things that I'll mention is that by nature of being women, we find it more difficult to tolerate and metabolize alcohol than men do. And there's, two main reasons for that. One is that we have less of an enzyme, alcohol dehydrogenase, that breaks down alcohol. So we have less of that. And we also have more body fat and less water able to sort of dilute alcohol. So, it's interesting that as women, we are more prone to liver disease from alcohol because of that, right? The other thing that can happen, obviously, as we go into midlife is we're going through hormonal changes. Perimenopause can start in our late 30s for some people and can last 10, 10 or 15 years until we can reach, when we actually hit menopause. And alcohol's impact on hormone regulation is not good either. So it can exacerbate symptoms of hot flushes, depression, anxiety. It may initially take a bit of the edge off some of those feelings because it gives us that dopamine hit initially. But more often than not, it's contributing to a lot of those symptoms, and particularly anxiety and feeling quite down as well. It can really, really push you further down into feeling, often women can feel incredibly depressed at this point in time in their life. The other thing that obviously it has a huge impact on, which we notice in perimenopause, is the impact it has on our sleep. So one of the worst things you can do at this time in your life is drink alcohol because it impacts the quality of sleep, it impacts the REM sleep that you have, which is really essential to healing.
Yeah, rejuvenate.
Yeah, exactly. All of those things. Women are more prone to getting breast cancer when they're postmenopausal or going through perimenopause. And alcohol increases the circulating estrogen in our bloodstream. It makes it harder for the body to process estrogen. Therefore, if we've got excess estrogen in our system, it can contribute to estrogen driven cancers like a breast cancer. Now, not all breast cancers are estrogen driven, but the particular breast cancer that I had high levels of estrogen in the pathology. So, another thing to be, to consider at this time in midlife. A- And I guess the other thing, and this is, I guess, just a simple point, is that the longer we drink for in life, the more likely we are to have physical, mental, emotional health implications from it. So, by nature of getting to midlife, if we've been drinking for decades, that's when we start to feel some of the effects of this behavior that we've had in our life for a long time. And that can just be general feelings of lethargy, of, fluid retention, of, having incredibly bad night sleeps, just feeling very, very grumpy. All of these things, contributing over the years. And then obviously it it can lead to more serious health complications for all aspects, of our brain. I mean, it kills brain cells every time we drink. That's simple, you know.
Well, like they say, it's actually poison. You're putting poison into your body. It's quite interesting the culture we have in this country, our relationship to alcohol. And it starts, and I see that with my kids. It starts at a very young age. It's all about being social. And then if you're in a social situation, you don't drink. It's like you're going through FOMO and then you've got pressure to drink. So it's kind of you're around it constantly. And it's I can imagine it'd be really hard to just step away from it completely. And, I'm the first to say, well, I'm not a big drinker, but I will have probably one glass a week. And if I go out, I will have a few glasses. But then that's enough for me. But it's still, I guess I do feel a little bit of, yeah, that fear of missing out because I quite like being in that social situation. And then if you don't have a glass of wine in your hand, it feels weird. So, the women that you have helped through your program, how many of them come out and stay off alcohol?
A significant amount. And they don't come into the program thinking necessarily that they're going to embrace an alcohol-free life for the rest of their life. And it's interesting. What they notice is that the more they are committed to it and the more they see and feel benefits and changes in so many areas of their life, the more likely they are to continue to make the choice each day of choosing to be alcohol free. And, one of the, you bring up this point of socializing without alcohol. And generally, this is one of the biggest barriers to people wanting to change their relationship with alcohol. It's about, how are they going to cope when they go into social situations, but it's also about the response of other people to their choice not to drink. So I often do a lot of work with people on preparing for those occasions, on looking at their mindset, on getting them to understand that when someone asks you if you want to drink, it's very easy to get thrown off course if you're not prepared. It's
Mm,
important to have a simple, straightforward response ready to go. And it can be as simple as, yes, I'd love a non alcoholic drink. I'm driving tonight. Yes, I'd love a non alcoholic drink getting up early tomorrow. And whatever. You just come up with something that feels positive and strong for you initially. And then you build confidence over time. Obviously, the first few times that you go into social events and go to parties without drinking alcohol, it does feel uncomfortable. But by taking action and building confidence one event at a time, you just start to think to yourself, actually, there are benefits from this as well. I remember conversations, I'm present, I can drive, I can leave when I want to, um, and I've still had a good time.
yeah, that's the thing. I've still had a good time because we connect alcohol with having a good time. But who's to say you can't have a good time if you're not drinking?
Exactly. And you only know that when you experience it, right? So I can tell people that here I am 6 years down the track and I am just as fun. Actually, I think I'm more fun. I have amazing time. I do I actually have a life where I choose to do a lot more different things now than I did when I was drinking because I just got stuck in the same old patterns. But now I'm up to try different things, which I think has created more fun and variety in my life. Now, I can say that, but until clients experience it, it's not real. But obviously, from a coach who's had a lived experience, it just sometimes gives them that hope that they need. They're like, I can say to them, I was where you were. I know exactly what that feels like. There's nothing different about me that you can't be that person either. And in fact, I had a client of mine who's, she's 51. She's based in Japan, actually, from the UK. So another big, big drinking culture. And I worked with her for the first 6 or 7 months of her alcohol free life. She was a binge drinker and she got to the point where she's like, it's too painful now. I don't want to do this anymore. And so she committed to 6 months of alcohol free life. And it was hard. She was grieving the loss of the party person, grieving the loss of so much. And she's like, "Oh, I don't know if I can keep doing this if this is what it is." And I was just like, hang in there, you'll get there. It takes time to sort of form your new identity. And anyway, 18 months later, I got this message from her and she's like, "Oh my God, I'm in the joy of it all. I can't believe it, but I am just the most present and happy in my life that I've ever been in. I got to that place that you spoke about, and I was like, "I told you." So when that happens, it just, it makes me feel so happy because they've created that for themselves, but it takes time.
You know how you hear that it takes so many days to break a habit? Now, how does that play into alcohol? Is it true? Or is it's a lot bigger than that?
Yes, and yes, and yes, it's both really. Alcohol, absolutely, and drinking is absolutely a habit. And what you notice is that after the first 3 weeks, the intensity of that habit really starts to dissipate. Yes, it's still on people's mind, but they've loosened that physical kind of, connection to it, but they've also started to practice days without it. So they've started to build that new kind of neural pathway in their brain. They've started to practice that new muscle. And so there absolutely is that, they say it takes 21 days or 30 days to sort of break a habit. And I think it is generally around that 20 to 30 days that I've seen clients, particularly those who've had a daily who've been drinking, pretty regularly. There's just this shift where they're like, I feel better. I'm not thinking about it as much. I'm getting to the end of the day and I might have thought about it once, but I'm not thinking about it every hour. And then there's sort of another shift that I see that happens around between the 60 and 90-day mark, where people then talk about how they really feel like the new way of being alcohol free, they've embraced it. They've seen the value and they're not thinking about drinking much at all anymore. And it's obviously different for each individual, but yes, it's a habit, but it's also why. And often there's so much to address, why you've been drinking. And that can be, a lot of it is psychological. And there can be lots of triggers that come up in life that will then trigger a response to, oh, I want to drink because that's what I've done in the past. So often people will, even after years, I mean, I've still had triggers that come up from past experiences, not that say I must have a drink, but they're like, oh, you used to drink in these circumstances or with these people. And, again, it's something to work through. I bumped into some people the other day who I hadn't seen for a long period of time. They remember me as Kath, the big drinker. When they hear now that I don't drink alcohol, I haven't for 6 years, I now work as an alcohol coach. It's kind of like, oh my God, who is this person?
I was going to ask you, how have your family and friends reacted to the new Kath? Because obviously you have come out the other side probably a different person.
Yeah. And I have, at the core of it, I'm the same person, but my lifestyle has changed a lot. My choices have changed a lot. And initially in the first year or two, it was tricky. There was some relationships and friendships that felt really distant or uncomfortable, particularly those with friends who really were big drinking friends or people who we did a lot of that sort of activity with. But I look now where I am in my life and I feel so supported by most of my friends. I've created new friendships in my life as well. And any friends that have really fallen away weren't necessarily long-term friendships anyway. They were probably based more on, being at the same school or, just going to events together. I guess the one thing I will mention is, my marriage. That is more complicated than just alcohol. But I think when I got married at 29, I was the drinking party girl, right? And, you know, my ex-husband and I have been through a lot in our marriage, and we've had some, wonderful times together, but also had some challenging times together. But I think it was confronting for him because we'd done lots of drinking together as a couple. And then for me, I had created this, this stop to something that he potentially still wanted, and that he grieved and missed that version of me. Um, and he stopped drinking for a couple of years, and we were pretty solid and happy at that point in time. But then decided for him it was really difficult. He didn't feel included in a lot of you know events with blokes, and I get all of that. And for me, it wasn't that I needed a partner who didn't drink, but I didn't really want to be in a relationship with someone that where alcohol was still something important. And it sort of ended up going that way a bit. And we just, we really, I guess, wanted different things out of lifestyle, what we were choosing to do. Uh, and so, I think that's probably been one of the big changes. And I think even me being alcohol free has given me the confidence and the clarity to make a massive choice to leave a long term relationship that comes with a lot of different complications. That's often never straightforward. But I feel like if I'd still been drinking, I probably wouldn't have been able to necessarily make this sort of choice for myself. So I do feel that I have made this choice for me.
And that is so important. You're making it for yourself because you've got to live with yourself as well. So we can't really be doing it for anyone else. And I love that story of yours. I think it's just so important for a lot of women to hear that. So what I want to also understand is if someone out there is thinking they might like to get some help, can you just basically talk through how it works, this coaching? Like, where do you start and how does it finish, or is it a continuation that they have a relationship with you? You can just give me a little bit of an idea of how it works.
I really offer one on one coaching, and I have, I guess, three signature programs. One, my shortest program is called the Alcohol Reset Program, which is a 5 session program, which really, I guess, is there for someone who's interested in exploring their relationship with alcohol, getting more mindful and aware, who maybe is thinking, I'm not sure I like where I'm at with my drinking, but I want to learn a bit more. I want to get some more knowledge. I want to talk with someone who's had their own experience and moved through. It doesn't necessarily have to be about quitting drinking, of course, and that's it. I'm not a quit drinking coach. I don't call myself that because, as I said before, that's not everyone's intention. And anyone who has an intention of wanting to learn more about alcohol, who wants to look more intensively and with awareness at their own habits and make some changes, it can only benefit your physical, mental and emotional health. So the alcohol reset program is great for that because it gives you 5 sessions. And then I've got a specific 12 session binge drinking breakthrough program, which is more intensive, which again, it is very targeted at binge drinkers and their specific type of drinking, which often isn't, daily drinking. And again, the elements that are really important in that as well is getting, knowledge and understanding about alcohol, about binge drinking, about its impact, but also looking at your own drinking blueprint, history, triggers, looking at all of that, working out, you know, why you want to make changes and how you want to feel in your life moving forward. And then I really help clients map out, action plans each week of, well, how are they going to do that? What events have they got coming up? And how are they going to approach alcohol in these events? Because really, if we don't make plans, We just go into autopilot and we do what we've always done. It's easy to tell ourselves, I don't want to drink too much. But as soon as we get there and we haven't got that top of mind, we've had 4 drinks before we know it. Whereas if, they've been working with me, they've got their little notes on their phone that they look at before they go in. They know their plan. It's just a few key points, but they're focused and they're prioritizing their relationship with alcohol. And that can sometimes be limiting drinks, having alcohol-free nights. It can be having conversations with particular people in your life that you need to tell them, hey, just so you know, I'm actually taking a break from alcohol at the moment and I'm really excited about it and I'd like your support. So, this is the other thing, starting to bring other people into and supporting what we're doing. Because often people go, oh, I don't want to tell my husband, I don't want to tell my friends. And that's absolutely their choice. And they can still do work on their relationship with alcohol very privately. But I always see people thrive when they get people in their lives on board and they say, hey, I'm not enjoying how my drinking is, or I've got a problem. I want help. I want support. And this is what I'm doing. And they really thrive then because people around are generally very supportive. And I will say, generally, people who aren't supportive or who say things that don't feel great are generally people who probably have their own relationship with alcohol that's coming through and what they're saying, and that's their stuff. It's really often uh, so even getting people to see that sometimes that it's not about you, it's actually about them. And I saw that in my own situation quite a lot.
Ellie actually gave a good tip when she said when she started, because she was surrounded by a lot of people who were big drinkers and they knew her to be that way, she actually reached out to a friend or a few to say, look, at this upcoming event, I'm just telling you that I'm not going to be drinking. So, like, pressure's off. So you don't have that expectation of me going in there and then forcing me to drink. And I thought, well, that's good because you're warning people before. Because I think if you warn people when they're sober, it's different to saying it when they've had a few drinks. And I thought that's a really good tip.
Yeah, great point. And that's absolutely so important. Tell people beforehand. Yeah. You text them, you call them up. I've had many clients navigating, 50th birthday celebrations, and they'll call the venue beforehand to say, look, what alcohol free options do you have? Can I drop a bottle of non alcoholic sparkling so you've got it there so that when I come, I can have a non alcoholic sparkling? All of these small things just really help because, of course, when you go to a party, often depending on what venue you're at, it's sometimes hard to find a non-alcoholic drink. You feel pressured to take a drink that someone's offered you. So it's really important to have a strategy as well, particularly in those early days. And for me, I'll often ask for a sparkling water in a champagne glass because I like the feeling of holding that glass. It reminds me of just, celebrating in good times. And then I'm sure a lot of people wouldn't even notice, and I wouldn't even care if they did. But these are all little tips and tricks that you can use.
Oh, I love it. Well, thank you, Kath. It's been really interesting to understand the process and also the why. And I guess we're all so different. And I think I'm a big advocate for really try and get into your own head and your own thoughts as to why do you do what you do? Because there are reasons for it, and we owe it to ourselves to work it out. So, if anyone out there is wanting some assistance, because I would say it's easier to do this with someone helping you alongside of you as opposed to doing it on your own. Some people can do it, but I would find it easier having someone like yourself that I guess I'm meeting up every week with. I'm accountable. It's the accountability as well. Because if you're not accountable to anyone else, well, then you're not really going to do it. Well, I know I can't. I'm not strong that way. So I will leave your details definitely in the show notes because it's yeah, I think it's a great thing and thank you for sharing your story. And I'm so glad that you're living the life that you're happy with and that you want, and that's awesome.
Oh, thank you, Michelle. It's so true. And you look, you hit the nail on the head. The accountability piece is just so important in all of this. Having accountability, and sometimes it's hard to be accountable to yourself. And I think the other thing that's obviously really important with the work that I do is that, the coaching with lived experience is very powerful. You feel heard and seen in your experience with someone who's been through and traveled their own path, but there are often similarities as well. And, honestly, I can say that my choice to be alcohol free is one of the best and most powerful choices I have ever made in my life. And it's enabled me to have deep trust in the person that I am. And from that place, I'm able to lead, I think, a more, and I know this word gets overused, but a more authentic life to me. And that's been, a really incredible part of this experience that I actually never expected either.
That's wonderful. I love it. I love stories like that. I love speaking to women like yourself because it just makes you realize there is hope. You can do the work if you want change. Now, I end all my episodes with the same question. Is there a quote that you love that has resonated with you throughout your past history, your journey, or something that you found recently that you'd love to share with us?
Do you know what? I have so many quotes that I love, but sometimes it's simple quotes that I think are really powerful. And, one of my favorites is Carl Jung. And, you know, this is the quote that I love of his: I am not what happened to me, I am who I choose to become. And I just think that is such a beautiful quote. And it is the way that I now choose to live my life as well.
Thank you, Kath. Once again, I've loved our chat and I wish you all the best in your second act.
Thank you, Michelle. The second act is going to be the best, I feel.
Absolutely. Here's to 2025.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Beautiful to talk to you.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Your Second Act. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love it if you could rate and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback means the world to me.